the homework that's assigned here. Last semester it was all the sentences. I may consider paring that down so we can have time for other activities. Whatever it may be, we'll turn that homework in on exam day. Just have it all stapled, make sure your name's on it, make it neat. And then I said I might not grade it all, but I don't want you, because I said it like that, I'm worried that people might not take it seriously. And I remembered I took a class once where the professor just chose randomly like 7 questions out of 100 or 50 and just graded those and took it out of those. So they didn't even care what I did on the other ones. You could have like played the gambling game, not done it. So maybe I'll do something like that where I just kind of pick 10 sentences out of all of them, grade those, and give you assess you that way. So do it all, but I guess if you get lucky and don't do some or make a lot of mistakes on others, I'll just keep it the same for everybody. Yes.
So it's gonna be graded on how correct it is, right?
Yeah, this as language class, it's for accuracy. I was thinking about it this morning. I think language is a lot for me. I think is it left brain where language and math and science kind of work for me. It's great. I love Latin because we get a lot of like English majors, and I don't know, maybe that's right brain versus we get both sides of the brain, both hemispheres of that in here. So, but for me, I'm successful in language because I'm good with numbers and memorizing things and stuff like that. Other people are successful for other reasons, right? So, but it's important that we're accurate. As I said, all the answers will be provided in class. We'll go over the sentences. There will be time to ask questions if you're wondering why. And you can always email me or come see me and talk about it if you're struggling to get the correct answers. Or once you get your first homework assignment graded and back, we can address what's going on there. It shouldn't be too bad. But please talk to me and use me as a tool. Okay, so did everyone has the book that's here today? Okay, so we're going to just jump right in. We left off like at the alphabet, I think. We went through the whole alphabet, and then we were out of time already, and I wanted to get into things. And so chapter 1. What's chapter 1 about? What are we looking at right away? Vocabulary, yes. Well, every chapter there's going to be a vocabulary, so we're not going to ever escape the vocabulary.
Verbs.
But verbs is the title in the bold. So we want to start with verbs because, verbs, I think Wheelock argues, could be the most important part of a sentence. Without a verb, we can't really tell what's going on. Verb, right? We know kind of dictates the action in the sentence. You can have a one sentence, right? A one-word sentence, and if that were the case, right, it would have to be, you just have a verb. You can't have a noun that just stands by itself, but you can have a command, right? Study. That's a sentence. It's a verb. It's an imperative verb, and we're going to talk about, when we talk about verbs, right, this first chapter is going to introduce what we call conjugations. So, did anyone that read the book, can anyone tell me about conjugations? What do we mean by that? How we're going to address that, how that's going to help us make our life easier.
How will a verb change based on the pronoun?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Based on the pronoun, there's a lot going on with it. It's not just the pronoun, but which we call like the person, right? But the tense, right? There's the mood and the voice, and these are all going to be, right, we're going to conjugate these verbs in Latin. And we do it in English too. We do it in Greek as well. But in Latin, just like Greek, you're going to have these certain conjugations, right? These certain, what we call inflections, where the endings change to help us identify, which helps us, right? If we have the ending, we don't necessarily need the pronoun. So with verbs, I think I want to use red. And it's important, right, because we're going to talk about these conjugations all semester long. We're going to learn the 4 conjugations this semester. We're going to get through all 4 of them. Not to be confused with declensions, right? Nouns decline and verbs you conjugate. You've probably seen that in another language class if you've taken anything else, right? Conjugate this verb. You can conjugate things in English, right? And nouns, there's not a whole lot of variation in, say, English, but in Latin you see them. So, conjugation. Let's see, I'm going to need an eraser on me at all times. right? It comes from the Latin word coniugare, right? So we're using the I as sort of that J sound as a consonant. Coniugare, which just means to join together, right? A verb joins together the subject with the object. Yes?
So single R is alveolar tap, and double R is a true. How does that work?
Interesting, yeah, alveolar tap. I just took an anatomy class and I know the alveolar socket in your tooth, so it must have something to do with
It's like
tapping.
one like trill is like a
Yeah, yeah.
alveolar, like you said coniugare.
Yeah,
So it's not re.
right, exactly, because if you read in the book, it'll talk about dentals and labials and guttals or gutturals or something like that, where you use your glottis or your teeth or your tongue to form the sentences. And that's helpful if you know if you look at that, and it's the same with Greek. But yeah, coniugare, that R is more of that trill, right? But it's not a double R. It's not, you don't quite roll it, but coniugare. So we'll practice more with that. But the weird one there, I think, is the I, and it's almost like it acts like a vowel, iugare. You can kind of sound it out, iugare. But if you say it real fast, it does sound like a Y, iugare. So however you like. But that's where we get this word conjugate, right? Also, to marry, right? Join together. So you can see it being used like that. And just remember, these are, when we're talking about conjugating, we're talking about verbs. And sometimes because we do the same thing, we conjugate verbs and we decline nouns. Sometimes even I'll say conjugate when I mean decline, but I usually catch myself, but I've already said it. And so that's okay, because you're constantly, putting different endings on verbs and different endings on nouns, and so you'll get used to it. And we just want to use be on the same terms in terms of the terminology, right? Just like when I'm in a science class, right? You have to learn a whole new language, and you follow that language all semester long. And if you're not, hip to it in the beginning, then you're kind of just like playing catch up all semester. Okay, so our discussion about verbs. Can I erase this? Everybody have this information? So, we mentioned a few things earlier when it comes to verbs, right? There's 5 important things that are in the book there. What are they?
Vox.
Vox, all right, vox, or vox. All right, so this means voice. Okay, that's one of them. Good.
Modus.
Modus,
Listen.
okay. Excellent, you're using the Latin, I like that. You don't have to know the Latin for this. This should be the tense, or the mode, all right? What else? You can use the English, you don't have to use the Latin. Yes, Sky?
The number.
Number, beautiful. Number, okay. Work. What else? Persona. All right. Persona non gratis. All right. That's obviously person. Okay. One more.
Tempus.
Yes. And you know what? Let's see. Tempus goes here. Mix it up. And the modus would go here for mood, I believe. Tempus, we've seen this before, right? Just means time, right? So the tense shows us what time we're in. So I like to think of them as person, let's see, first person, so one person, number, right? Like when we look at a verb, we'll kind of think about it. You can go in whatever, but this is how I like to do it. We'll think, what person is it in? What number? First person, present tense, say, for example. Active as a voice. Indicative. And so things like that, after you study Latin for a while, you just have that ingrained. You look at a verb and then your teacher says, well, tell me about that verb. Oh, well, that's first person or second or third person, singular or plural, present or imperfect or future, active or subjunctive or imperative. Active, and then indicative or imperative. So first person, present, active, indicative, something like that. That's just an example. And if you go out of order, that's okay, but it kind of has that just ring to it, at least for me. And that should be, again, familiar for any of the Greek students in here. I think just 2, actually. Yeah, right? Okay, cool. So, conjugation. So keep this in mind. Let's look at number 1, right? Let's reevaluate it, because again, I feel like some people last semester, like knowing what a person is or a tense is isn't necessarily obvious for everybody. So if this is boring for you, bear with me. This class will get more exciting. So what do we mean by person?
Subject.
Subject, okay. Okay, good. So give me some examples. I, okay, I would be what person?
First.
First, good. So we can have first person, right? Like I, or even we. All right, what else could we have?
Second person,
Yep,
which is you.
right, both of the yous.
Third person.
And third person, such as,
He, she, it.
right? And this is worth talking about here. Right, and this is why we have to go down the list, because the person is just very vague right now. There are only 3 choices, and again, on the first exam, you're going to get a verb, and you're going to have to go through this list and tell me about it. And so, it's good to know, like, well, even if I don't know, you've got a 33% chance here. You might even have a 50% chance in other places. And this is something you need to be able to do in Latin 113. But that's why we're going to have to go further to figure out, is it the I or the we? Is it the you singular or you plural? Right? Could be a lot of things. So a couple things worth noting. I and we, straightforward. Interesting about you, how in English we just use you, maybe you all, right? Or y'all. Anyone know, but in English we used to differentiate between the singular and the plural. Anyone read any Shakespeare or seen know any other ways to say you in the older days? Or if you go to church, a lot of biblical stuff.
Wait, what was the question again?
Thou.
Thou, yeah. We're trying to find why in English nowadays we've simplified you. You could mean you could mean all of you. You could be the subject, you can be the object, but English actually used to be a lot like Latin and had endings and you is a noun, basically a pronoun, so it would decline, it would have different cases. All right, but yes, thou. Thou is equal to you singular, right? If you're talking to one you would say thou. And maybe you might even, if you've taken other languages, know that when you say you to someone in Spanish or French, you don't use that first person you. It's very impolite, right? We have this form in Spanish called the usted form or ustedes, right? And that's they're actually using the he or she conjugation, right? Or in French, they use the vous form, the you plural, when they're talking to one person. Parlez-vous anglais when you go to France, and so, because just like English, you wouldn't say thou to someone. If you said thou to someone you don't know or a stranger, it's a little harsh. Like it implies that you know, right? We don't, hey you. So we use that more polite, and then it just fell out. So a little history of our language on the side. Because I was thinking about it earlier. Yes.
I feel like an easier way to address like second person plural would be y'all.
It is, yeah, and I know Mr. Fisher likes to use that. Y'all.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all. Whatever works. Yeah, I know you don't have to. And so, when it comes to like an exam or a quiz, like I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Like if it makes sense in English. But if you want to, put you singular or you plural or you all, then I'll know, what you're talking about. But as long as it looks good enough that it would pass for plain old English, if you're doing a translation, that's fine. But good point. Let's see. Yeah, in church. I don't know if anybody's Catholic here, but after you say the Our Father, you raise your hands and you say, "For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory are yours," etc. and I thought about that, thine, right? How about that word? Well, thine is the kingdom, is just, the kingdom is to you. We're going to learn about the dative case in here. And so thine would be another form of you in English. So this Latin kind of, explains a lot that I've never really studied English like that. I've seen it, I've heard it, but I've never thought about why. But once you know the Latin, you can start to really understand. And it helps you with, even in German, which is not a Romance language, but you get these different cases. But we'll get back to the verbs here. For third, this is worth noting. Let's go back here real quick and review. For first person, if it is first person, the subject can only be I or we. Those are your only two choices, right? For second, if the subject is you, it's you singular or you plural when we're talking about, right, person. But for third, the subject doesn't have to always be he, she, it, or they. What else could it be? Can anyone think of an example of a third person subject besides
name.
these pronouns? What?
A name?
A name. Yeah, a name would work. Yeah, because it's a specific person, right? He is just a pronoun that stands in place for his name or what have you. But also any other noun, right? Any common noun, right? A table, right? A congregation. Books would be plural, right? And so these pronouns stand in place. So interesting, though, you should think about that if you see a verb with the first person ending, you got a 50-50 chance of getting it right. If you see a verb with a second person ending, 50-50 chance, or actually almost 100% chance if you translated it just as you, right? If you don't know, like I said, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Whereas third person, we're going to have to look a little deeper in the sentence. If there's no subject given, if we're looking for a subject, right, then it's safe to use a he, she, it, or they if it's a plural. But if we do find a noun, right, that's in the nominative case we'll talk about when we talk about nouns, then that's going to be our subject. So this can be difficult, right? But we're going to hold this the whole way through the semester. We're going to be referring to the person, right? And then let's go to the number, right? That's going to help us narrow it down here, right? So what's our number? Singular or plural, right? Again, 50-50. Let's see, so this is fine. Sometimes you'll see me write it out a little further, like this. So you don't have to write it out every single time. Either one, right? I'll know what you mean. So now we can, yes?
What's the Latin for that?
This should be numerous. Believe. Again, you don't need to know the Latin. It's in the book. For these, we'll stick to the vocab list and what comes out. That'll be plenty, but it's always good to have an idea. Okay. Singular or plural? Perfect. So it should be pretty easy here, right? We know, is I singular or plural? Singular, right? Any questions on what singular or plural we mentioned here, right? You could be either one, you all, plural, and then he, she, or it are the singular, they are the plural. You'd be surprised, yeah, that still can be, down the road. I'm like, oh, I thought we all were on the same page, but it happens. There's a lot to keep track of. Okay, so person, number, let's go to tempus or tense. What are we talking about here?
The time.
Time, right? Such as, let's throw some examples out.
Past tense, present
Perfect.
tense.
There are 6 tenses in Latin.
Imperfect.
The present, good. We're going to start with the present, as most languages do. Then the next one we're going to learn is the imperfect, which is not as obvious. It's a version of the past, incomplete action, but not a bad one to learn second as well. We're basically going to hit the imperfect and future after we cover some nouns. And then there are 3 more which we will do this semester. Anybody know the other 3? Subjunctive is going to be down here in mood. Yeah, but good to throw these terms around, right? That's why we're doing this exercise, because it's easy to conflate these and put them in the wrong category until you just have done it so many times over and over again.
Past perfect.
Yeah, we're in perfect. So basically, there's different names we give them. So we have basically the simple past or the perfect, and then the past perfect they call the pluperfect or plus perfect or even more perfect, and then you'll have the future perfect. So you can see how, you start mixing and matching these, how many different endings we're going to get just for one verb in Latin. Present tense. Everybody should be good speaking in the present tense like I'm doing now, right? Putting INGs on the end of my verbs here a lot. It's action that takes place in the present. I am teaching this class right now. You all are listening, right? You are writing. You write. There's the emphatic present. There's the simple present. There's different types of present that we use in English, right? I am teaching. I teach. I do teach. The emphatic, right? And those have slightly different meanings to us in English. We all speak English, so we get those. We understand that, right? In Latin, we just have the present tense, and those are in place of all three of those. So you can, when you're translating sentences, you can use any of those translations. Whatever you think might be necessary, right? You have that sort of poetic license in your translation. Imperfect is like I used to, right? I was going to school, and then something came up, I dropped out. We'll talk more about that. That one's a little bit harder to grasp in English. We use it all the time. We just don't necessarily refer to it like that, imperfect. Whereas future tense, everybody knows the future tense, right? As I said, I'll ask people to translate it, and they translate it perfectly, and I ask them what tense after they told me they used will or shall, and then they might not know, and I'm thinking like, okay, well, this is not a Latin problem, right? This is an English problem. If you don't know, if you can say something in English and translate it into perfect English, but you don't know what tense you're in when it's a simple like present or future. It's kind of alarming. Obviously, the Latin will make mistakes a lot, but make sure you brush up on your English grammar for this class. And then the perfects we'll do at the very end, the perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect, right? This is more like, right, I taught, I heard, right? We know those endings. Pluperfect, I had taught, I had heard, I will have heard, right? These get a little bit more, less common as you go. Okay, that's enough on tenses. Okay, fourth, the voice. What do we mean by voice? Or give me some examples of the voices. These are our two voices. Good. So this semester, we're just going to focus on the active voice. All right, we don't have to worry about the passive. So there's an easy one for you that's already done. Now, but still, you might see a column on the exam to put the voice down for each of these verbs, and some people will still put passive, or they'll put future perfect or subjunctive or something that's just in the wrong column, and it's like, well, obviously we're missing a handful of people today, right? So you missed this lecture, and you're here now to know that when you see a column with V or voice, we're going to be in active. Okay, we'll get to the passive next semester. And what do we mean by that, right? Can someone use an example of something in the active voice and then use a similar sentence in the passive voice? Do you know how to do that? Not sure if I gave one the other day.
Like I am throwing versus like I was throwing a ball.
Okay, that will be more like present versus imperfect, actually. You're the subject, you're the one throwing the ball, right? The difference is you're doing it right now, I am throwing it, versus yesterday I was throwing the ball and then I got interrupted by a phone call. That's the imperfect, because you didn't quite, it's not I threw the ball. Perfect, I was throwing. But that's good that you're thinking like that. So,
I throw the ball is thrown.
yes, perfect. I throw the ball. I am actively throwing the ball. The ball is being thrown by me, right? It's the exact same sentence, just worded differently. So good. So right, and now you know, right? That's we totally understand what you said, right? We use it all the time, and now we're just putting labels on it. So active voice. Okay, good. Not too bad. So far, really, like I think the hardest one is the tense out of these. What we've done, even though voice and the mood might be a little bit more difficult, but since there's only one answer, then we can just say, oh yeah, that's active. And then the modus or the mood. What do we got here? What do we think? Yep, I was just going to say, you already said one of them, so there's the subjunctive. The imperative, good. And the indicative, all right, well done. And again, well, I'll get to it. I was going to say, we can use some abbreviations when you're doing your chart on the exam, right? And IMP for imperative or IND for indicative. I'm kind of, I do want you guys to be able to spell things correctly. And, obviously this isn't the Latin, so I'm not going to worry about if you misspell things in English, but I will, correct it and want you to be able to improve your spelling in English as well in this class if you'd like to. We won't do the subjunctive, but that's fine. SUBJ, right, for the subjunctive. But yeah, so for 113, we're just going to worry about the imperative and the indicative for the mood. So another 50-50. And as I said, I got answers on that. And it came up on every exam too. Like the very first part of every exam was a chart for verbs. And I still would get subjunctive. So don't make that mistake now. Okay, let's talk a little bit about these moods, right? I think I mentioned it on Tuesday. Indicative. Anybody have an idea about the indicative mood?
Indicates fact.
Indicates facts, perfect, right? It says it in the name pretty much. Not as obvious, but yeah, if you can, indicative indicates, right, from index, your index finger from Latin. It indicates facts, right? Did I give the example in the subjunctive on Tuesday, right? It's when you use words like would and should and could and were, right? And so a lot of times we make people speak in the subjunctive all the time, but they use the wrong verbs. And that one doesn't annoy me too much, but it might annoy you. Once you learn how to use it, you'll kind of be like, oh, no, that's wrong. There's another one I hear. Sometimes I hear some people say, I have not ate today. And it just makes my skin crawl. I have not ate today. And the correct, right, it's eaten. I have not eaten today. So if you do make that mistake now you won't anymore. And unfortunately, we won't get to participles this semester. But this is a participle, and as soon as this person that I know takes Latin 114, they will understand a little better. Well, they probably won't because they're a family member of mine, but one day they'll get a cousin. Let's see, what else was there about that? What was I going to say? Something was on my mind. Maybe it'll come back to me. Okay, so indicates facts, subjunctive, don't worry about. Imperative. How about imperative?
Orders action.
Orders action. Such as, an example? Walk the dog. Right? Or as I said earlier, just this one word. I forgot what I used. Study. Eat. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. This one is kind of obvious to me, like it really shouldn't be this. The harder ones are like, I think maybe you might hear people say, I have drank that before. That one is wrong, but it doesn't make my skin crawl, right? It should be, I have drunk. and maybe because drunk means something else in English, but it's drink, drank, drunk, eat, ate, eaten. So if eaten goes here, then drunk must go there by, just understanding the logic to it. That's okay. I wish we could get to that this semester, but we won't. Anyways, we'll close the thoughts on that. All right, that takes care of it. There's really one more important thing that doesn't fit into any of these categories. Did anyone read about that?
Paradigm?
Paradigm, okay, so we're getting to the paradigms, so you're right, we do need to talk about the paradigms. But there's one more thing called an infinitive. Right, not finite. So the infinitive doesn't fall into any of these categories. And for the next part of the class, we'll talk about these two verbs, laudare and monere. These are the infinitives of to praise, to warn or advise. Right, and notice in Latin, one word takes care of it, laudare for the infinitive, and in English, the infinitive of praise or praising, or however you want to call it, we need that to praise. And we get, right, an infinitive. So remember, all these terms we use in Latin, we also use in English and other languages, so there's nothing, we're not making stuff up here. We're just diving deeper into the language. Okay, any question about this half of the board here that we talked about? This is all in the book, just kind of, just going through it, getting a little practice with it, being able to fill all these in when you get a verb. And we're going to start finally talking about some real stuff here, some verbs, right? We're going to put some different endings on them. And you should be able to look at a verb. Any one verb, right? We'll have to have something different. One verb form to the next, right? Can't have all 6 of these the same. It could be 5 the same and 1 different, but they're all very unique, right? Just kind of like we talked about here, right? We could be first person in a lot of different verbs, but it could be I or we, right? So we're going to need to go down the list to change it up. Right, we could have first person, singular, present, active, indicative, and then, right, we could also do something very, very similar with imperative. Except that wasn't a good example because imperatives usually are going to be in that you form. We do have first person imperatives. We definitely have third imperatives in Greek that we use a lot, right? Let there be light, let him do this. We can do that in Latin too, but we don't talk about it quite yet. Okay, but the infinitive, basically though, infinitives can have all these 1 through 4, or at least, 2, 3, no, present, active, infinitive. So 3, 4, that's what we're going to have. We could have a present active infinitive, we could have a present passive infinitive, which we won't discuss. You could have a perfect infinitive, but those can get a little crazy, right? A perfect infinitive, even I have to stop and wrap my head around that. To have praised. To have praised God on Sunday would have been a really good idea for me. Just as an example of a sentence, right? The sentences can start to get a little crazy. So you'll see in this class, we're going to keep our sentences, we're going to take the hypotheticals away. We're going to take things like perfect infinitives out of the equation, and we're just going to deal with facts or imperative stuff, right, in different moods. So anyways, we'll get more practice with this. But no questions about anything like this? Ready for the verbs? Yes, go ahead.
So for this one, like, cause you know, like for Spanish, like you have like the main word and then you add in like the like two clause or whatever.
Yeah.
So then, so for basic, would that be the same for like all those verbs, like the, laudare, or, I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, laudare, laudare.
Okay, so then, so if it was for like, past, or like they, right, it would be laudent, and.
So yeah, they praise.
And so same as like to warn as well?
Yep, yep. The difference is the ending here. This is gonna be the first conjugation and the second conjugation. And do you notice the difference? Really just here and here. They both, you're gonna see this RE, all the infinitives are gonna end in RE. The difference is and they're gonna have a stem, which will be different, right? Loud, mon is the stem. And then we're gonna have, right, first conjugation will have an A, second conjugation will have an E with the macron. We're gonna learn a third conjugation with an ERE without a macron. So this is one of those times where the macron is important when you study Latin. One of the very few times. Here, so and I'll stress that for you as we go. So yeah, we have, Jasmine, just a bunch of different endings, just like you do in Spanish. I'm not sure if I understood your question entirely.
Yeah, cause I was just trying to figure out, like, so say, like, we just know, like, the stem
Yeah.
word, and then so is all of, cause you know sometimes for some of the Spanish words, like, the ending is different based off of that specific word.
Yep.
So for this one, would it be, like, all the same for the ending, or is it gonna be very specific to that specific word?
It's gonna be just like Spanish, where we're gonna have 6 different endings. Right, so we're gonna have the first, second, and third person. Right, those are 3 categories, and each of those will have 2 different endings for singular and plural, giving us 6 endings.
Yeah, no, cause like for some of like the words, cause like the ending part is spelled differently.
Right.
For those specific like Spanish words.
Yes.
So that's why I was wondering, is it gonna be the same for all 6 of them? Or is it like gonna be different depending on that stem word?
The difference won't depend on the stem, the difference will be in the endings, just like Spanish.
Okay.
Yeah. Unlike English, right? We don't have different endings for English except one.
No, cause I like in my mind, I remember there's a specific like Spanish word that's with a different ending that's
Mhm.
spelled like differently from.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you can think of that example,
Okay.
let me know, and it might be easier to tackle it. But it's a good point because maybe we can just look at it in English real quick, right? Let's just look at praise, right? Since we're gonna talk about praise. Let's do a quick exercise in English. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at I praise. Obviously, I don't think I need to ask you what belongs here, which conjugation, right? I'm basically conjugating praise in English right now. And this is what we're gonna do in Latin. He, she, or it. Now notice, wait for it, we've got some inflection happening here. Alright, it's not praise, but praises. So we do get an ending change. Exciting stuff here, I know. We praise, you all, or you plural, right? Praise. And then we have they praise. So, just worth pointing out, we absolutely need the pronoun in English to know what in the heck we're talking about. In this case, maybe we don't need the pronoun to know that we're in the third person singular here, but if you just said praises, right, we would have no idea who you're talking about. We're just gonna have to assume it's a he, she, or it, but it could be, well, common nouns and things aren't gonna be doing any praising, but we wouldn't know, right? And so, whereas in Spanish, right, we could have just one word, right, and we would know by the ending, happens to be O in Spanish, right? Just by the ending, we could figure it out, right? Sometimes you hear people mixing Spanish with English and, might say preso or something, yo preso. I don't think that's the right term, but. So that's the inflection in English, and I was trying to answer that question where you would have 6 different endings in Spanish as well, and we're going to see those come up in Latin. So we can all do that in English, right? And so it's great. We can drop these pronouns in Latin, right? And we'll definitely have an idea just by the ending, the inflection. We'll know who's doing the praising. Unless it's that third, right? We might have to look for a specific subject. Okay, so how do we conjugate, right? And notice, right, we keep it in this order. Right, we're going to do the singular. We always make like a little box like this. We're going to do the plural over here, and then we'll look at it like this. Right, we're now getting into the paradigm, right, or from Greek, paradigma, right, an example, right, the paradigm. So we're going to take our infinitive up top here. And better, right, remember I think on last class I mentioned and I'm probably going to confuse these 2 classes since I'm doing both and not remember if I did it in here or the other class, but if you look it up in the dictionary, right, you'll see this when you look up praise. They'll give you what they call the principal parts of a verb. And from these 4 principal parts, you can figure out the endings, right? This gives you all the information. This is kind of how they broke it down. This is how we should teach Latin. If you have these memorized and you know a few simple rules, you'll be able to get it. So laudo is just going to be the first person, right? Singular, present, active, indicative. Right there, right? That satisfies all 6. Here, this is going to be your present active infinitive. Remember, the infinitive doesn't have person or number. There's only one form of the infinitive. Laudare, to praise. Laudavi, this is the first person, not present, but perfect active indicative. We will learn this semester. And then this is the participle, as I mentioned, praised. Or like we saw others, right? Eaten, drunk, right? Participles can get a little irregular. So this one, don't worry about the 4th principal part of the semester. Keep this in your back pocket for this semester at some point towards the end. But this is, right, moving forward on the quizzes and the exams. When I ask you to translate a verb, when I give you the verb praise or to praise, I want both of these. And the instruction should be on there to give that as well. Okay, so we're ready to start translating. As I said, if you want to put other principal parts on your quizzes and exams, you're welcome to. I won't take any points off, just if you feel comfortable doing it, because you're going to have to memorize later. I told you I was expected to know all 4 right off the bat in my 101 Latin class. But nowadays they're like, well, let's go easy on them. We want people to take Latin and have fun, not be miserable, so maybe that's why. Okay, so right, I mentioned this is first person singular. So one of them is already done for you, laudo. And I erased it, but this means, what does this mean, laudo? I praise, or I am praising, or I do praise. I really do praise, right? That's the emphatic version of the present. Okay, then typically we finish the singular next, right? So we want to do you praise, you singular praise. So we need an ending from our stem, right? The infinitive is going to give us the stem. Yeah, in fact, it's a little irregular just in the first. The stem is actually going to be lauda. Laudas, okay. And how about for the third? He, she, or it praises?
Laudat.
Laudat, thank you. All right, and plural?
Laudamus.
Laudamus. All right, and the second person plural?
Laudatis.
Right, you just take that stem. Laudatis.
Laudant.
Laudam. Brava. Alright, so this is how we organize our verbs. In every conjugation, we'll go through it like this. And so certain things must be memorized, right? Notice that we have the stem lauda coming up, and we see it here, 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 and here, but we don't see it here. That's why I accidentally, right, only highlighted till there, because, right, I try not to memorize too many things, right? There's only so much room in your brain, so if you can think about the logic, it will help you out a lot. So what happened here? How come we lost an A? Everything should be logical. All right, stem plus an ending, stem plus an ending, stem plus an ending, not a stem plus an ending. So what happened was, it actually was there. All right, that should be the logic there, laudao, stem plus the ending. But if you say it 5 times fast and you speak Latin for thousands and thousands of years, it just became laudo. Laudao, 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 laudo, laudo, right? So it just dropped out, right? And that just happens in all languages, right? Over evolution of a language. All right, so if it helps you, right, if you can't understand why the heck, there's the logic there. Now, let's just look at it another way. All right, let's take laudare up here. Again, we're looking at the infinitive. To get the present, right, to be able to copy this chart from memory, what we're going to do, right, and we're going to do this with a lot of the verbs, you're going to see the pattern. We're going to cancel or drop the re. That's going to give us our stem. Okay, just like I mentioned. And then we're going to add the personal endings. So anybody that's parents took Latin or grandparents took Latin might tell you that when they learned Latin they would chant, right? Because there's so many different endings and all types of different ways. And I'll try to spare you of the chanting. It might come up with me. When I learned Latin, my teacher was still teaching us and chanting. But it helps, I think. And as I like to say, or as my teacher told me once, she's like, you might run into somebody at a cocktail party 20 years from now and realizing you both took Latin, and they'll say, oh my God, did you chant? And then you'll both, say, hic, hi, co, quies, quick, com, co, ki, hi, huck. And it's just, that's how you learn it. And it will be with you forever. And that's all the different ways to say this and these. We'll learn that in like chapter 9 or 10. It's a lot to handle. That's where we might have to slow things down a little bit. But just preparing you now. And I knew it was going to be hard, but the chanting, it did stick with me. And whenever I'm feeling like, oh man, I don't know if I can do this, I realize it's all in there. Your brain is an incredible thing. And so we'll get there. But for now, with the chanting, because I still have my elementary Latin teacher in the back of my head, ost mustis und. Ost mustis und. These are the endings. And that should stay with you, right? Think about it and get it, tattooed in your mind. Chant it. O-S-T
Did you chant
mus
when you learned like the Japanese
tis
part?
tis
I literally said
ns.
when kaki cooking.
Right? Again, another thing like, you have to memorize it, but I feel like when you chant it, it's not quite memorizing. It's different. It's in there another way. It's like learning when you sing the lyrics to a song. You don't have that necessarily memorized. The song comes on and you sing it. Oh, st mustis und. So all we do, we take our infinitive, right? We look up any verb, especially in the first conjugation for now, until I tell you otherwise. right? We cancel, drop the re, find the stem, add the endings, and just remember, right, on the first one, the lao dao, that's the weird one. Just realize right off the bat we need to just tweak it a little bit, right? So if you were to, go run around the block for 5 minutes and come back and try to take a quiz on this, or after an hour studying and you went through it all and right, you memorize the endings and you put lao dao, right? That's forgivable, but you'll realize not to make that mistake, right, after we get through it. So, and we'll have this first mini quiz and we'll do something like that. Try to fix that. But this shouldn't be too bad. Okay? Any questions about the meanings or the endings? No? Okay, good. Pretty straightforward. See you, Jasmine. We're going to do the first, we're going to do the endings. We're going to do the same thing for monere. Right? Monere is the second conjugation. So who can walk me through, right, just by the logic we're applying, right, who can fill out this chart for monere? Who wants to take a stab at it? Right? Let's go for the first singular. I warn.
Monedo.
Okay?
Or moneo.
Yeah, this one actually is going to follow the pattern perfectly, where you drop the stem and add the endings. Monio with the E works. We don't need to drop it because it does have that people say moneo, but it's monio. The accent's on the first part. That would have to be, let's see, there's the ultima, the penultima, and what is it? The 3 syllables in Greek, right? Do you remember?
It's fuzzy.
Yeah, you know what, I don't know if David Fisher goes into the accents as much as I like to. But there's the penult, the antepenult, and the ultima, which just refers to the ultima is the last syllable, the penultima is the penultimate or second to last syllable, and the ultima is the third to last syllable. And in Greek they have to be accented on any of these 3, never forward. So we don't really get too much into the accents in Latin, but if you do care about pronunciation, you'll see me try to correct that and get that right. So it is monio as opposed to moneo, but that's a common mistake. But we're just going to take the stem. Where are we at? So let's look at it here. Monere. Don't forget the macron. So what's the stem?
Mone.
It is mone, right? Not just mon. So be careful with that. Remember, just cancel the re. Drop the re. So we're going to take mone, and we're going to add the ending, right? Monio. Right? We don't need the accent, but sometimes I'll put it there. It's just for emphasis and for you to know. You don't have to memorize where the accent would be. The book will show it to you as well. Right? So I'm going to write the stem all the way across, because that's not going to change. Okay, what should I put here?
T.
Plus mus.
Tis.
Tis. Alright. Monio, mones, monet, monemus, monetis, moment. Okay, so yeah, just be real careful, I think, on the first person, right? Where there's just a little bit different where right, this is very regular, the stem plus the endings. Just remember that slight modification. And we'll stick with first and second conjugation for a little while before we get to the third. Right, we're going to get to some nouns and some other grammatical points. But if you can just be comfortable with this, we're going to learn before we get into the third conjugation, we're going to learn the future. We're going to learn the imperfect of the first and second conjugations. And all we're going to do is just modify the endings. We're going to use the same stem. Right, we're not going to do anything crazy here. Right, we're just going to use the stem and modify the endings, and it's going to tell us what tempus, right, what tense we're in. And it's not too bad. The third declension is the hardest, and then the fourth is a little easier. It gets easier than more difficult. Okay, and then lastly, the imperative. Let's not skip the imperative. This is easy too, actually. All right, did anybody read about the imperative and how we can form that? Laudate. Okay. And we have 2 forms of the imperative. We have lauda and laudate, right? And this should be, you should recognize this. What is this, lauda? It's the stem, right? Again, just drop the re and don't add any personal endings. And you've got the stem. Praise. You singular. Praise. Every day. Praise. Laudate. You all praise. Laudate. You all praise. Right? In Greek, these forms are the same, right? The second person plural and the infinitive, the endings are identical. So you have to use the context of the sentence to know the difference. But in Latin, we never have that problem. Right? And so this, right, this looks nothing like any of these endings. Maybe a little, you got a T, right? You got the stem plus a T, but this is IS and this is te. And these, right? And you'll see in the sentence, right? Whether it's an exclamation point or, right? You kind of, right? Think about how that would come in English, right? You all praise, right? Using that as a command. Like I threw in every day, right? There's not, I can't, right? Or, you know, praise the Lord. That's a command, isn't it? All right, so now you have everything you need. Yes?
Is there a third person imperative?
There is, but we don't discuss it yet in Latin, right? Let him be praised, right? Or let him praise would be the third person. We don't have that form in Latin, at least for now. And then, oh yeah, for warn, advise. How are we going to do that? How do we say it? You warn. Warn me.
Monet. Oh,
Monet. Monet.
Monet.
Monet. Was that Billy Joel? Or Billy Idol? Forget. It's Billy Idol, right? Thank you. And you all praise? Or excuse me, you all warn?
Monet.
Monete. Right? Drop the re, drop the re, drop the re, add the te. Alright, so just watch out. That's the lesson for chapter 1. Okay, we got almost 15 minutes left. Let's look at the sentences and see what we're going to do in this class. Let's see the structure. I'm going to erase this. Right, and you're going to see we don't have a lot of vocab. So the sentences are going to be kind of dry until we build up our vocab. We don't even have any nouns, right, yet. We just have these verbs. So we can't really form awesome sentences. And you'll see how short they are. And they'll have to give you
Okay with that.
glossary. But notice too the vocabulary.
First chapter. I mean, once I actually tried to read it, I was like, okay.
Notice the vocabulary list, right? This is, let's talk about the mini quiz real quick. All right, so memorize all the vocabulary. This is the memorization part. And then be able to reproduce what we did over here, right? And it might not be this particular verb, right? Someone give me a verb real quick. We might not get to the sentences today, but give me another verb from the vocab list. Give me the infinitive, or the first two principal parts, whichever you like.
Cogito.
Cogito. Is that Descartes? Cogito ergo sum. Right? Have you heard that one? I think, therefore I am. Right? Cogito. Cogitare. Cogitavi. Cogitatum. Right? And notice there's probably in the dictionary there's probably a macron over the A, is there not? There is a macron there?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is one of those times where we don't need it, right? This is not, there's actually a lot of accent and punctuation. Don't worry about those. The long marks, right? Accent marks. I'll tell you when the macron's necessary. Just like it's necessary, I've got it up here on monere. This is the one where I want you for this chapter to remember your macron.
And that's about it.
Right? So I know that you know until we both know that we know. Does that make sense? That's when you guys hang with me, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But for now, I'd like to see it, please. So cogito, cogitare, but you don't need it for this one. Because this A this ARE, or A in the verbs will always be first conjugation. This is the easiest conjugation. Okay, so how do we say I think? Cogito. How do we say you all think? Cogitatis. Right? So every time, right, for any of these questions I'm asking you, right, you're going to just take the cogita and add the ending, right? Remember, for the first, we dropped that A. So there it is there, right? The first one's given to you in the dictionary. And then we add our language. OST must und. We think. Cogitamus, right? You singular think, or thou think. Thou thinkest. Cogitas. Bravo. It thinks. Cogitat, right? With the T ending. So be careful too with the Spanish, because it'll come up where you'll say like, oh, in Spanish it ends in an O, and in Spanish it ends in an S. But in the third person Spanish doesn't end in a T, right? It just ends without an S. In fact, the third person singular in Spanish would look a lot more like the imperative singular, right?
Thank God I didn't test.
Hago, haces, hace. All right, so
That's why.
unfortunately the Spanish will just keep coming up, and some people I know might understand it or have taken it, since it's probably the most common one we're asked to study here in high school. But it does work, in other languages too, but that's the one that comes to mind for me. Okay, good. So you should be, right? So on the mini quiz, I don't have to necessarily give you laudo, laudare, or monio, monere. Any of those are fair game, right? I'd say, give me the present, active, indicative, right, of these. If I ask for the present, active, indicative, would you put these here? Would you add those to the list? No. Why not? Because these are present active imperatives. So try to solidify the difference in your mind. Get the indicative and imperative. That can be, they're both longer words, begin with an I. I may be more discreet with how I approach the question, but you should know that right, present active indicative will have the 6 forms. And another question would be, what are the imperatives, right? Or what is the present active imperative singular? What is the present active imperative plural? And we know we're talking about the second person, right? Because we just said we're not going to do third person imperatives here. How about an ERE, a second conjugation? Are there any in there? If there are. Debere is a good one. Debio. Debere, don't forget the macron, right? And if you want to give it a try for later, debui, debitum. Okay. They must. How do we say they must? Or they ought. They, so what's the personal ending for they? Third person plural? NT. And what's the stem? Debe? Just debe. Right? They must. Right? How about you must? You singular? You must. Debes. Right? You all must. Debetis. Okay. I must. Debeo. Debeo. Remember, that one's tricky because the accent's there, but all good. Debeo. Okay, and then I don't think we're going to use the imperative, right? I can't really think of how you would use that. This is one of those special verbs that usually needs another verb to kind of get the point across. But theoretically, hypothetically, if there were, all right, notice I'm speaking English in the subjunctive. If there were an imperative, what would it be? Right. Debe. All right. Must. Ought. I don't think so. But so I won't ask you silly questions like that. But you would know how to form it, right? It would just be right. We just follow the logic, right? You all must. Maybe. You all must. No, it needs something. We can't just leave it on. We tried. It would look like that, but we know that's no good. All right, so be able to form the indicative, right, and the imperative. And know the vocabulary. So for the last bit of class, we'll look at the vocab, and we'll have you do some sentences for the next time we meet. Okay. Dang, it locked me out. Okay, let's just go around the room. Sam, do you want to start off? What do we got?
Just the top word.
Yeah, just read the Latin and then the English. Right? We know you don't have to tell me it's an adverb.
All right, me, which is me, myself.
Okay, maybe take another one.
Quid, which is what.
Okay, good. So we're gonna have a few words to put, to mess around with besides verbs. All right, go ahead, Maxim.
Nihil.
Nihil. This is a good one. It's a noun. The endings will never change on that, so that's good, right? And they show you some words we get from it, right? Nihilism. If anybody's seen it, Lebowski, seen it there. Okay, Sky. What else?
Known,
Okay.
which is not.
Okay, take another.
And then sepe,
Saipe.
which is often.
Yeah, that's that diphthong there. Saipe, the AE, so one sound. Saipe, often, and then you can do that last one too if I've got the same as you.
And then
Si,
if,
if, right? So si, yeah, not as in yes, but as in if. Si. Okay, Joseph.
Amo, amare, amavi, amatum, which is to love, like.
Okay, great. Joseph.
I
You don't have your book?
no, it shipped late, so I'm getting until tomorrow.
That's okay. Okay. Oh, bummer. I didn't realize. I would
Yeah,
have
I'm
given
sorry,
you
I
mine.
should have mentioned it earlier.
Yeah. No. Please let me know because I do have this extra copy, which I'm not sure I'm gonna
Oh.
keep bringing to class, but you'll have it next time.
Oh yeah,
hopefully?
it's here tomorrow.
Okay.
So
Okay,
I'll
great.
let
Email
you
me
know.
if you don't, because I may stop lugging my books around since I have a digital copy. Okay, Cindy.
Cogito,
Yes.
to think, ponder, consider, or plan.
Okay. Good. Go ahead, Luke.
Debeo, to owe, ought, must, or should.
Okay. Good. And go ahead. Give them all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Debere, debui,
Right.
and debite.
Good. Yeah, it's good practice just to hear it out. Thank you, Jordan.
Do, dare, dedi, and datum, to give or offer.
Okay. Great, Erica.
Ero, errare, erravi, erratum, to wander, err, go astray, make a mistake, or be mistaken.
Okay, that's definitely a good verb to know. We'll do a lot of errare in here. Ella?
Laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum, and to praise.
Okay, great. Nisa?
Monio, monete, nui, monitum, to
Okay.
remind.
Yeah, there's another one, to remind, right? Not just advise or warn. And this reminds me, right, when you guys are doing the mini quizzes on the vocab, don't get too hung up on all of them. Sometimes there's a lot of different English translations. One will do, and I'd rather you just put one correct one than like 4 wrong ones with the right one in there. But if you want to, I'd like to see you try to put as many as you can, right? I'll definitely keep that in mind when grading. If you've got 4 right ones and 1 wrong one, then you pretty much got it. But if you got 4 wrong ones and 1 right one, maybe just stick with the 1 right one, if that makes sense. Okay, let's do another round, Sam.
Which word are we on? I'm sorry.
Let's see, which one did you do, Nisa?
Monio.
Monio, so.
Okay, cool. Salveo, salvere.
Okay, good, and there's a special meaning there too.
To be well, to be in good health.
Yeah, what else?
Oh, hello, salve.
Right, salve and salvate, right? So if you want to say hi to me, right, or I want to say hi to you all, notice those are imperatives, right? We're just taking the stem. Salve from salveo, salvere. Be careful, it does not mean to salvage or to save, right? I see a lot of good guesses on quizzes on what it could be. All right, go ahead, Maxim.
Servo, servare, servavi, servatum. To preserve, save, keep, and guard.
Good. We also have conservo, conservare, conservavi, conservatum, just a stronger version of it, right? And look at that. This one does not mean to serve, right? So look at the different meanings from that. Terreo, terrere, to frighten or terrify. Valeo, valere, this is how, right, for the imperative, this is how we say goodbye, right? Be strong. Vale, valete, be strong. Goodbye or farewell, but also, right, to be strong. And then video, vedere, to see, and voco, vocare, to call or summon. I see other mistakes on that one too, of what they want it to be. But yeah, pay attention, be careful with that one, to call or to summon. So we're out of time. Unfortunately, we didn't get to sentences, but that happens. I would like you to translate the sentences though. Let's go ahead and do them all. 1 through 20, you've got the whole weekend. The mini quiz shouldn't be too bad, so you should have time. Note